Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to week 5. This week we're doing a discussion. We're doing a SWOT analysis on our companies. And so I've got Textron, obviously. And we're going to start by going over company structure. I'm sorry if the names are kind of small on here. This is just the only way I can incorporate this. There was not really a good way to make a company structure with the different bubbles and everything, but this is what I came up with off the Textron website. Obviously, the key player here is Mr. Donnelly. He's the CEO of the company, and we've got board of directors, executive officers, segment and business unit presidents, and so these will be people that are responsible for the different businesses at Textron. And then obviously corporate officers. And Textron doesn't have one single owner. They're owned by shareholders. And obviously the people that govern that are the board of directors. So you get to talking about corporate aviation, we're all the people that turn to the left. And these would be all the people that turn to the right when they walk up the steps. So we want to talk about strengths. Textron leads the industry in customer satisfaction and innovation, which is really true. And they've been able to piggyback off some really good brands. They come in, they buy a company, they buy a successful brand. I mean, take Cessna, Beechcraft, Hawker, in their aviation department. All of those are very successful aviation companies. And, essentially they've been able to just take over and take credit for all the strengths that those companies have taken years to develop. So we talk about high level of customer satisfaction. They get that just from the brand. People that are loyal to the brand, Cessna. It's like if you did all your training in a Cessna aircraft, you're probably going to be preferable to a Cessna aircraft over a Piper. Strong brand portfolio. We've already talked about some of the brands. Bell Helicopter, Easy Go, Arctic Cat. All of these brands are owned by Textron. You have to remember, we're not talking about just them as aviation, but as a company as a whole. Successful track record on developing new products and good returns on capital expenditure. So, obviously, new products for the military that they're developing. They've actually got a Scorpion light attack aircraft that's already developed, and they're waiting on the go-ahead for that. Weaknesses, like most other companies, they can be affected by any event, global, political, like we talked about in financial statements. Really the problem that they have right now is a high turnover rate of employees. A lot of these employees are employed through labor unions, and Textron is going through something right now where they just signed a new agreement with the labor unions that basically they're going to have work and jobs for these employees. So they really lose a lot of employees quickly, maybe in the manufacturing areas. They're also losing ability to compete in niche markets. We're starting to see, aviation is expensive, and we're starting to see a lot of smaller aviation companies pop up. I don't know how much literature you guys read, but I get a lot of stuff from AOPA and also EAA. I get their magazines every month, and I read about articles about new manufacturers popping up and building aircraft at a cheaper price than, what you can buy a Cessna 172 for, which I want to say now is like $350,000, $450,000 now for a new Cessna. It's crazy. A lot of gaps in product ranges, and I say that's a weakness, maybe in particular brands. So, Cessna used to be heavy in the twin market. Now they don't have that anymore, but they have Beechcraft, so they can satisfy that with the King Air. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are very nostalgic about some of the certain aircraft that Cessna used to make, like the 340 and the 441C, 421C. Good turboprop aircraft for corporate aviation they're not making anymore. Obviously, Beechcraft has done and taken over with that. So they did kind of fill those gaps, but I don't think that they filled them completely. Another thing that I noticed when I was picking companies and looking through, and I looked through some of your guys' companies, was Textron has a really weak social media presence. And maybe that's not a big deal. You wouldn't think, Lockheed Martin, what do they need to be on social media marketing for? But everybody knows who Lockheed Martin is and what they do, at least people in the aviation community. They're kind of a household name through a lot of their advances that they've made, military contracts and things like that. Textron is not so much. When you ask people who Textron is, they may not know that they own all of these brands. So I'd like to see a bigger presence on social media by Textron, and I forget the exact numbers, but Lockheed Martin has, I want to say, in the 300,000 followers, something like that on Twitter, which is crazy for an aerospace company like that. So opportunities to expand, new markets from government contracts, and also stable free cash flow. Textron does a good job of stacking away cash for a rainy day, so they have plenty to operate on, plus investments. And they can also decrease the cost of their shipping and transportation, growing military and aerospace markets. Like I said, for social media, they really need to improve their marketing. And I think that's what I want to harp on for my presentation for Textron is they really need to be marketing and figuring out ways to get new customers. And they do have some small marketing, for general aviation and things like that. Maybe they set up a booth somewhere, but they're not really doing a good job at grasping new customers. I mean, we're all flying around in a lot of planes that were made in the 60s. So, for cost preferences, they really need to find a way to grab new customers. Threats, failure to develop competitive products. That's one thing. 300,000, 450,000 for a Cessna 172. I think that's crazy. And there's a lot of new competitive aviation companies coming. And I'm going to skip the two and we'll talk about foreign markets. So China is pretty much, they've made a counterfeit of everything. And we're looking at China is coming up with their own, Cessna type 172 aircraft to train their pilots. And, I wouldn't necessarily want to fly in it, but, it is tempting when you look at the cost of, what you can buy a Cessna made here in the U.S. for new. And one thing I liked about the book this week, and I think for Textron, for my company, I like the net profits, net worth. So this is going to give the shareholders a general idea of how much money they're going to be making. The book says the owner's return should be approximately 10 to 20% for an aviation company because it's, it can have its ups and downs like right now with COVID-19. So they want to see a 10 to 20% return for, the investment to be worth it. I don't think that's realistic with Textron because they're in so many different areas other than aviation. I think that they could be in this 10 to 20% range, and I'd have to go back and look at the financials, but I think that investors would be doing pretty good with that. Also, it talked about in the first part of the book, how you want to analyze the company as a whole, and I think Textron definitely needs to be analyzed as a whole company versus just each and individual segments of the company. Well, that's all I have for you this week, guys. Here's my references. Let me know if you have any questions. Bleep bloop them down in the comments below. Have a good week.